Hi, my name is Dr. John Foldy from SUNY Albany, and I was recently asked to give a presentation at the Northeast Regional Gathering of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And this is a preview of coming attractions, as it were. I'm presenting 4 paradigm shifts. One has to do with our subjective internal reality, and that paradigm shift is called Galileo theory. The second is a theory of our objective external reality, and that's called holographic theory. The third paradigm shift is the connection between the internal and external reality, the Galileo holographic model. And the fourth paradigm shift is called the primacy model of consciousness, which was the title of my presentation at the Institute of Noetic Sciences conference. The Galileo model and the holographic model both conceptualize our internal reality and external reality as frequency interference patterns. And the link between those two is called rhythm entrainment, which was discovered by Christian Huygens, contemporary of Newton and the first developer of pendulum clocks. And it has theoretical and empirical implications which lead to exploring the primacy model of consciousness developed by Thaddeus Golas. So the presentation will start with Galileo theory, then move to holographic theory, then show how these two are connected, and show the experiments I've done and the theoretical modeling that leads to the primacy model of consciousness. And the implications of that, the work that the team of researchers I'm working with now are at this stage a kind of three-pronged approach to understanding the evolution of consciousness. And any questions that any of you may have, I can be reached at jjfoldy, F-O-L-D-Y, at gmail.com. And I hope you enjoy it.
Dr. Foldy came to us at our Ions Community Group in Altamont, New York, the Capital Region's Ions Community Program. He presented this model, and it kind of left us all dumbfounded at the end. So I thought this would be something that everybody should enjoy. So without much talk, Dr. John Foldy.
Good morning, and thank you for letting me speak at the second annual Northeast Regional Conference of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. I'm very excited to be here. I want to report, first of all, that there were no incidences of violence last night at the Peace Village here. When I was in 7th grade, I read a book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And I saw Richard Bach, the author, on Johnny Carson get a job. And I went out to the University of California, Davis, in California. But my freshman year, I saw that Jonathan Livingston Seagull was part of this book, part of a class called The Undiscovered Self. One of the books was Jonathan Livingston Seagull. The other one was a book by Carlos Castaneda, who wrote the series of Don Juan, and the sorcerer's apprentice, as it were. He was an anthropology graduate student who became an apprentice of the sorcerer Don Juan in Mexico, shaman. And the other book was, there were several books, but one of them was Carl Jung, The Undiscovered Self. One was Many Mansions, about Edgar Casey. One was a book called Seth Speaks, about a book that was channeled. So I was intrigued by the study of consciousness from freshman year on. But what happened when my senior year, I took a class with a professor named Joe Wolfel. essentially got me into this business, this academic world of the science of understanding cognition, cognitive science. And Joe Woelfel made a realization, he also made a discovery. He realized that the traditional way of measuring attitudes and beliefs was based on categorical logic. You've all seen these types of attitude scales. You know, strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. Categorical five category Likert scales, or semantic differential scales. And he realized that there was two problems with this type of measurement of attitudes and beliefs. Number one, information theory says the amount of information or the number of bits you get from a measurement is proportional to the amount of possibilities. Right? So if you strongly disagree with something, right, you still have to plug it into one of 5 of these slots. So you're limiting the amount of bits of information. Plus, the second flaw is that there's no reference frame. Okay? We don't know how strongly disagree. No reference frame. Okay? We don't know how strongly disagree for one group of people that examples the same as strongly disagree for another group of people. So without a reference frame, you can't compare across studies. So Joe realized that physical science, they use a different type of logic. They use comparative logic. They say, here's a foot, or here's a meter, and then you compare. So he realized that if we want to play like the big boys, to be physical scientists, we need to use the same logic of measurement. Okay? So that was number one. He made a discovery that you can predict behavior based on the average of expectations of significant others. The study was done called the Significant Other Study. They're trying to predict how many years of education a high school student would attend based on expectations from their friends, or their family, or their guidance counselors. And what they found was that none of the groups were good at predicting what the student would do, but when you average the expectations, it explained 89% of the variance. That means 9 times out of 10, behavior was completely predictable. And that was a real big deal. In social science, if you explain 10% what's going on, they shut down the store and say, oh, we're scientists. You know? But explaining 90% of the variance, unheard of. But you essentially are the average of your incoming information. If you have a cue ball coming in here, a cue ball coming in there, the motion will be the average of the resultant vector forces. So Joe originally called this linear force aggregation theory, but he didn't want to be known going down history as the person that came up with the LFAC theory. So he changed it to Galileo theory in homage to Galileo, who was the first person to describe motion of objects in terms of mathematics. He said, we can think of our internal reality as a cognitive space. Right? Inside the space are concepts or objects, anything you can designate or refer to. The closer in meaning, the closer in space. So you can see the doctor and lawyer are closer together, doctor and construction worker are very far apart. These are people's perceptions of different occupations. But you give them a reference frame first, right? In terms of, say, if you're measuring concepts about politics, okay? You give them a reference frame, a mental ruler. You say, the difference in meaning between liberal and moderate is 100 units. That has no meaning in and of itself. But if you say, if liberal and moderate is 100 units, how far is Rush Limbaugh from the liberal? All right, in my mind, 10,000 units. But the point is, if you give somebody a mental yardstick, they can estimate the similarities among concepts. Okay? So what I did is according to Joe's application of Newtonian mechanics, communication is a force. If I say concept A is like concept B, I'm trying to move them closer into space. Right? If I say your mom's a communist, I'm not going to change the view of your mom because that's a big marble in your space. You can think of them as marbles in a jello wall. All right? These objects in a conceptual space. Some marbles are bigger than others. It's harder to push. If I say my friend Archie's a communist, you instantly associate because you have no previous mass. So concepts have mass proportional to the number of messages or the amount of information. Communication is a force. If I say A is like B, I'm trying to move those marbles closer into space. If I say A is like B is like C, I'm moving toward the center of the configuration. Okay. Which means this. You can actually map out what people think, and you can figure out the effects of any combination of messages. If I make a map of what people perceive about candidate X, I'm trying to figure out what can I say that will move candidate X closer to the self. Because the self concept is like the center tinker toy for which you build out all other conceptual relationships. Right? It's the center marble in that space. Right? The first thing that you designate or refer to when you're a baby is ma, dad. You separate yourself from those objects. We were talking about that earlier, Charles. Anyways, when you give somebody a map, a mental ruler, say liberal and moderate is 100 units, and you have them estimate how far other concepts in that neighborhood, we're talking about politics right now, we map out that space. We know that if we associate candidate X with environment that moves those closer together and moves candidate X away from self, so that would be a bad message. If we say candidate X is a strong leader, now we're getting somewhere. Because candidate X and leader will not move towards each other. But if we say candidate X's leadership has brought our economic situation back into par, they move towards the center of the configuration, and you can see, boom, candidate X moves directly towards the self. So he's cracked the case on persuasion. He's turned political losers into winners. He's turned marketship completely around. And nobody knows about this. Why? Because it's a major paradigm shift. I read a book called The Aquarian Conspiracy when I was a graduate student. And I learned about Thomas Kuhn's book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, and he coined the term paradigm shift. And any paradigm shift is changing your pair of sunglasses, the way you view reality. Okay? It's an either-or change. Okay? Copernicus was the first guy to say, hey, we're not the center of the universe. Darwin was the first guy to say, hey, it's not creationism, it's evolution, things change. Einstein was the first guy to say, hey, space-time is not absolute, it's relative. Faster you move, slower time goes. Well, anytime you have a paradigm shift, I think either ordeal, you're ripping off some of the sunglasses, right? It causes you to blow baby caves in. Now, I don't care if you remember the flat Earth society. It just ain't flat, right? We know that. So, what we're going to do, Galileo model is a paradigm shift in social science. We're going to link it with holographic theory, which is a paradigm shift in physical science. We're going to combine the two, Galileo holographic model, into a third paradigm shift. And the fourth paradigm shift is the primacy model, which is actually developed by this guy, Thaddeus Golas, in this book, The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment. And this is Joe's book, and I can pass it around. Now, if concepts have mass, the more information, the harder it is to move. In quantum theory, anything that has mass also has vibrational. Okay? I don't know if you ever heard of an electron microscope, but de Broglie was the first guy to combine Einstein's equation with Planck's equation and show that even electrons, which are particles, they also diffract. They have wave-like properties. So I was saying to Joe, hey, Joe, if we measure these things over time, we should find oscillations, which is what I did. That's the published version of my dissertation, Conceptual Structures as Damped Harmonic Oscillators. Soon to be a major motion picture. But actually it is, because it's the first motion picture of concepts oscillating. Okay. We added de Broglie's, which is up there in the corner. Mass equals hv over c squared, which means essentially anything that has mass also has frequency. And